Hey guys, today we are going to talk about something called percent of change. Okay, so please put that title in your notebook. All right, percent of change or in your notes. All right, so a percent of change is, and if you want to write this down, it's the percent an amount increases or decreases. Okay, so we want to know like by what percent did it change? All right, so percent of change is just like, well, what percent is it changing by? Okay, now there's two ways to do a percent of change problem. And I'm going to kind of show you these two ways. So again, anytime you need to write something out, push pause and then push play when you're ready to go on. All right, so there's two ways to do a percent of change problem. And you're going to want to write these down. So the first way is you can use a proportion. Okay, so here's the proportion way. Okay, to do a percent of change problem. All right, the percent of change, which is the percent, goes over 100 just like normally. Okay, and then we have what did it change by? That goes over the original amount. The original amount is kind of like the whole. The change is kind of like the part. Okay, so you can do it this way. You can set up a proportion. I'll show you that way. And then you can cross multiply and divide. The second way is there's a equation. You can do the percent times the original. That'll give you the change. And you kind of have to remember that. It's the percent times the original is kind of like the whole. That'll give you the change, which is like the part. Okay, so remember when we're doing percent times numbers, it always has to be times the whole or the original. Okay, so I'm going to show you kind of both ways. You'll get to choose which way you like better, just like we've done with all the other problems. All right, so here would be an example. Let's start with this. It says last year a school had 632 students. So that was last year. This year the school has 670 students. It says find the percent of increase. Okay, so this is called percent of change, percent of increase. Okay, so we want to know like what percent did it increase by or what percent did it change by? All right, so here's what you can do. One way you can do this is to do a proportion. So I'm going to kind of set up a little proportion over here. Now, I don't know what the percent was that it changed by, so I'm going to put x over 100. Okay, now I do know my original amount. My whole amount of students to start with goes on the bottom. So I started with 632 students. That was my original amount. That goes on the bottom. Now I'm kind of thinking, I'm trying to find the percent that it increased by. So over here needs to be the amount that it increased by. Like what did it change by? So from 632 to 670, how many students did that change by? So to figure that out, you could just type that in on your calculator. How much did it go up? Because it increased, right? So I'm going to do 670 minus 632, and I get 38. That was how much it changed by. Okay, so now that I have that part done, now I can do my cross multiplying and dividing. I'm going to do 38 times 100, and then divide by 632. Okay, so I get an answer of x equals 6.01. So my answer is it changed by 6%. So it was a 6% increase. Okay, now that's one way to do it. The second way to do it is with that equation I showed you. So I can do the percent, I don't know my percent, times my original amount, times 632, equals my change, or what did it change by? It changed by 38 students. Okay, so now if I want to solve this, I want to get the x by itself, so I can just divide by 632 on both sides. So I'm going to do 38, I'm typing this in, 38 divided by 632, and I get 0.0601. So I have to change that to a percent. So I'm going to move it over twice, and I still get 6.01%. So either way I did it, it was a 6% change or a 6% increase. That's what it changed by. So anytime you're like working with like what did it change by or what amount did it change by, that's called percent of change. Okay, let's look at another one. It says, last week you finished level 2 on a video game in 32 minutes. Today you finished that level in 28 minutes. What was the percent of change, or what percent did it decrease by? This would be kind of like a decrease one because you did it in 32 minutes last week. Now you did it in 28 minutes. So it kind of went down. So this is like a percent of decrease one. Okay, so now I'm going to do it two ways again. So my first way, I can set up a proportion. All right, if I'm doing this first way, I don't know what my percent was, so I'm going to put x over 100. I want to know what percent did it change by, what percent did it go down by. Okay, my original amount was it originally took me 32 minutes. That goes on bottom. Okay, now it's my percent of change, so I need to figure out, well, what did it change by from 32 to 28? Well, looks like I beat it by 4 minutes, so my change was 4 minutes. Okay, so now I can do my cross multiplying and dividing here. So I'm going to do 4 times 100, and then divide by 32, and I get 12.5. So my answer would be 12.5%. Okay, now over here I'm going to do it the other way. I can do my percent, which I don't know, times the whole. Well, my whole was my 32. That's what I started at. That would give me the part it changed by. Well, it changed by 4. Okay, if I want to do this, I'm going to divide by 32 on both sides. So I do 4 divided by 32, and I get 0.125. Now I have to change that to a percent, so I'm going to move it over twice, and I get about 12.5%. So this changed by 12.5%. It decreased. So I decreased my time for the level by 12.5%. Okay, so that's kind of percent of change. Now let's look at another one. Okay, now this one, it says, let's kind of look at the table. It says the table shows the number of hours you spent online last weekend. What is the percent of change from Saturday to Sunday? So I want to know, well, what percent did it change by? Okay, so again, I can kind of do it two ways. I'm going to do the proportion way first. I don't know what percent it changed by, but that's over 100. Okay, my original amount is going from Saturday to Sunday. So Saturday is my original amount. I spent 2 hours online. That's my original. Okay, I want to know, well, what did it change by? So from 2 to 4.5, I spent an extra 2.5. That was what it changed by. I just subtracted that. 4.5 minus 2 gives me 2.5. That was my change. I'll put that on top. Okay, so now I'm going to cross multiply and divide 100 times 2.5, and then divide by 2, and I get 125%. Okay, because it went up by a lot. It over doubled, so it has to be over 100%. So it went up by 125%. Now, if I do it the other way, I can do my percent, which I don't know, times my original, gives me my part. Well, what did it change by? Changed by 2.5. Okay, so same thing. I'm going to kind of divide by 2 on both sides. So if I do 2.5 divided by 2, I get 1.25. I got to change that to a percent. So it'd be 125%. All I did was move the decimal over twice. Okay, now there's another type of problem that you're going to get. It's going to look like this. What if I told you I started out with 8 meters and I want to increase it by 25%? Okay, I want to increase it by 25%. So I want it to go up 25%. I want to figure out what's my new amount. So how many meters am I going to have if I increase that by 25%? So here's kind of a way you could do it. Now I'm going to do proportion first. Okay, so I'm increasing by 25%. That's my percent of change. So I'm going to put 25% over 100. My original amount is 8. This is going to give me what it's going to change by, what I'm going to increase it by. So I'll put X here. Okay, so let's cross multiply and divide. So again, I'm going to do 8 times 25, and then I'm going to divide by 100. And I get X equals 2. So it's going to increase by 2. Okay, so now I want to know what's my new amount. Well, I started with 8 meters, plus another. It's increasing by 2 meters, so my new amount would be 10 meters. Okay, now if I want to do it the other way with the equation, okay, I can kind of think, well, I'm going to do my percent, which is 25%, times the original amount. That's going to give me the change, or the part it's going to increase by. So if I do 0.25 times 8, I get 2. That's what it's changing by. So now I have to figure out the new amount. Well, I start with 8 meters plus 2 meters. That's going to give me 10 meters. That would be my new amount. Okay, so I had something, I increased it by a percent. I had to find what the new part was. Okay, we're going to try one more of these. So let's say we had 75 students, and we're going to decrease it. Okay, we're going to decrease it by 80%. Okay, so I want to know how many students would I have. Okay, so I'm going to see if I can solve this. It's kind of a percent of change because I'm decreasing. Okay, so my percent I'm decreasing by is 80% goes over 100. My original amount of students is 75. I want to know, well, what does it change by? What am I decreasing it by? Okay, let's cross multiply and divide. 75 times 80, and then divide by 100. Okay, and I get 60. So that's not how many students I have now. That's my decrease. Remember, this was the percent I decreased, so this is the amount I decreased by. So I started with 75. I'm decreasing, so I'm going to subtract the 60. So 75, take away the 60, I would be left with 15 students. Okay, now if I do it the other way, so I'm going to do my percent, 0.80, times my original amount. That's going to give me my decrease, or my change. Okay, so I'm going to do 0.80 times 75. I get 60. Now remember, that's how much I decreased it by. So again, I'm going to do 75, take away the 60, okay, which still gives me 15 students. Either way, I did it. All right, so what I just covered was percent of change. So what is it increasing or decreasing by? What percent is it changing by? That's what we're going to keep practicing a little bit more tomorrow. So you need to make sure you bring these notes to class tomorrow. Okay, I do have a form for you to fill out, so please fill in the form. It has some questions right on it. And then we will kind of practice this stuff in class tomorrow. All right, see you tomorrow.